Welcome to another episode of the Wandering Watercolor. Let's paint. So this is the 9th page of the forest scenery watercolor coloring book that I make. Just like the previous one, I added a lot of detail on this one, and the reason is I want the line work to do most of the heavy lifting here so that the focus can be on mixing colors and light and color, basically. As always, just a brush. Any brush works. Place to mix your colors. This is just a porcelain soap dish, but any porcelain plate or anything works really for mixing your colors. On the side I have 2 jars of water, a paper towel, and a palette. This is just the Prang 15 mini watercolors. It's actually a really good palette. I'm genuinely surprised how good this palette is. Most of the images that I've painted in this series have been with that palette. I already sprayed the paint just so that it's easier to work with. And that being said, let's get started. So I'm going to do the same thing that I did with the last image, where I'm basically mixing kind of like a green teal mixture to block out the background. So it's really good whenever you're working with a very dense image where it's a lot of information and you want to kind of separate the background from the foreground. And let's say if it was the reverse, if I wanted, if the emphasis was on the background, then I would do the same for the foreground. But in this case, you know, the raccoon, obviously that's munching on a mushroom, along with the different logs and the foliage in the foreground. All of this is the foreground. The rest I'm going to block out using this kind of like greenish teal color, and I'll show you how we're going to do that. So I'm mixing up a lot because we have a lot of area to cover in the background. And so first, it's going to be, I'm going in, starting down here, and kind of going around these leaves here and the fern and the different details. It's okay if you go outside of the line a little bit, that's not a problem. But I'm doing this to help block out the background. And this color is going to stay pretty consistent back here within this kind of like triangle that's blocked in by the trees. And then when we get to this part in the background, I'm going to fade it upwards, and you'll see what I mean in a second. Here, I'm just basically almost as if I'm using a marker. You can tell that I'm not too worried about shading or texture. I'm just blocking in the color so that we can establish where the different planes are in the image. Granted, you can kind of tell just by looking at it, but because there's so much information here, like this is definitely, I put more work into this book than any other book so far, and I think part of it is because I've gotten better at my line work and composition. And naturally, you know, if you're doing something for a while, you just get better at it. But then you have to remember not to always add so much detail. I think the next book that I do will be much more simplified, just to balance things out. Okay, I'm blocking this in. And again, I'm not trying to be perfect, I just kind of want to give that idea of where the background is. Okay, so here I'm going to be a little more careful around the raccoon, since the raccoon and the mushroom are the focal point. And then when we get to right about here, I'm going to block this in. Actually, just going to cover all this. Okay, and as I oh, see, I got the raccoon's nose. Uh-oh. And as I go upwards here, I'm just gonna get a little bit of the light blue and then kind of bring that down and fade it out and mix it in like that. Definitely want a little bit of that blue in here as it goes upwards. Like that. Over here. And there we go. Okay, I'm gonna rinse my brush now completely. Dry it off, but there's still some moisture in it, and I'm just gonna pick up that excess color that I got on the nose. And it's not the end of the world because I can always just paint over it anyway. It's just bothering me a little bit. There we go. Okay, now I can focus on all the trees, basically where all the bark is. And so I'm gonna grab a good amount of the brown. I'm gonna add some water to it because that's also a lot of ground to cover with this brown. And I'll go ahead and start layering it in, or I should say blocking it in, since this is the first layer. There are some patches of moss that I've added to the trees, and I'm just gonna avoid them as best I can. Like some up here. Cover all of that. And again, really anything other than the raccoon and the mushroom, I'm not too worried about going outside of the line or things blending in a little bit, since they're not the focal point. They're more of some background information. It doesn't require as much detail. And back here like that. I'm gonna cover all that. Okay, I'm gonna rinse my brush completely, grab some of the yellow, and then just kind of fade in that edge and create a little bit of that highlight from the sun that's peeking through. Put a little bit there, like that. Here, rinse my brush, dry it off, and then actually I'm going to pick up a little bit just to create more of a highlight, like that. Like that. And grab a little more here. Add some down here. Here. Okay. And just taking my time, just blocking kind of like half of the tree. And the half that would be in shadow. That's what kind of I'm focusing on, as you can tell. Rinse my brush. Grab the yellow. And you can tell as it dries, obviously watercolor always dries lighter, but just like to point that out every now and then. There's some patches of moss that are growing on the trees. I'm just kind of leaving in. Okay. Rinse my brush. Next, I'm going to grab the yellow green, and on your palette, whatever palette you're using, is just a mixture of yellow and green. That's how simple that is. And I'm just gonna kind of start blocking in more of the foreground colors, but I'm not you can tell I'm not too careful about it. Because there's a lot of information, I don't want to be meticulous and do every single little blade of grass or leaf. I'm focusing more on the color and lighting as opposed to the details, if that makes sense. Because most of the details are already laid in by the line work. So I'm just kind of blocking that in. Like that. Okay. Going in here and in here. There we go. Get some water, get more of the green. I'm not diluting it too much because I want it to stand out. So there is a level of saturation to the yellow green that I want to be visible and stand out against the background. I'm just kind of adding it in like that, up here, and more up here. So these leaves up here like that. Over here, and just taking my time. Again, not too worried if I go out of the lines, but I don't want to be, like completely all over the place. There we go. I'm gonna rinse my brush. Now I'm going to grab some of the darker green, kind of an emerald green. If you don't have this color, just add a little bit of blue to your green, whatever you're using. And I'm going to go ahead and start laying that in for the little mossy patches. Little mossy patches here and there. On the tree stumps, on the logs. Some here, over here, a little bit up here on top of the brown that we already marked in, and that's okay, like that. I missed my brush. Actually saw a couple of spots where I missed. Oh, picked up the purple there on accident. Okay, I'm gonna grab the yellow green. So I missed this spot over here. Like that. Like that. Rinse my brush. Go back to the brown. And some back here. Over here. This branch over here. Okay. And now for the mushrooms. So these mushrooms, I do want to, there's some here, here, and here. And all of them are going to be a red or kind of like an orange red. And you don't want to just have red in one spot because it'll look off balance. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab some of the red, a little bit of the orange, and just testing how it looks. That's pretty good. That's not bad. Mix it up a little more. Let's see. That's perfect. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and put that in here, 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 and you'll notice I'm kind of doing it like halfway. And here. I don't want it to be too much. And then I'm gonna grab some of the orange only and put it in more towards the top so it blends in nicely. Grab that. Okay. And I'm actually going to pick up a little bit, kind of like a highlight, a little bit off the top here and here, just so it doesn't look so synthetic, just so it's not so flat. Okay, so while we have some of these parts drying and the mushrooms are drying, next I'm going to focus on the color for the raccoon. And the raccoon is kind of like a earthy gray, so I'm going to use the brown along with some blue. That's too much blue. Mix it up. Maybe a little more blue. There we go. Put some water. I want to have a good amount of it mixed together to work off of. More water. Let's see, I'm gonna test that out. Okay, that looks pretty good. And so first I'm just gonna lay in the color where, obviously where I imagine the shadows being. So on the lower part of the limbs, like that. And back here. Over here. Like that. Over here. And the tail, I'm just gonna cover it fully like that. Okay, so now I'm gonna rinse my brush, grab a little bit of the yellow, or just grab some of the mixture, make a line, or just kind of add it on the parts that are white on top of the raccoon, and then just let them bleed in. But then a little bit, I'm gonna rinse my brush and then just kind of use the water to just fade in the rest, like that. It's not too much, not too little. There we go. I'm actually gonna use the same thing for the limbs, just kind of like a gray, like a light gray. I'm gonna rinse out my brush and just gonna pick up some of that excess right here, just more of a highlight. Yeah, see, that red is very strong. I did not intend for it to come off that strong. I'm just gonna grab some yellow and mix it in with some of the brown here, just to for the stem of the mushroom. There we go. Same down here. I rinse my brush. Next, I'm just gonna grab more of the brown, a little bit of purple, and that's gonna be my color for the shadow. So I'm gonna go ahead and add that in here like that. More back here for the bark. Right here, maybe a couple of lines going upwards just to show some of the texture. Definitely underneath the raccoon, just to show the shadow that the raccoon is casting. Like that. Over here. This side. There we go. And then on this side a little bit. Just maybe on this branch, like that. Okay, and then definitely this branch that's underneath here. It's a little more in shadow. Go, rinse my brush. And for the ears for the raccoon, I'm going to mix in some of the brown with a little bit of the red. I don't want too much since we see how strong the red is. But just kind of like that, just a little bit of that fleshy color inside the ear. And we're almost done. I actually think it looks pretty good, despite I dislike how red the mushrooms came out, but I do still think it looks pretty good. So the next thing is, well, two things. Actually, I'm going to add a little more of the gray in the raccoon just for the shadowy areas. So definitely a little bit here, like that. A little bit down here. Not too much, but just enough to just kind of convey that these areas are darker. The tail. I'm gonna dry it off, pick up some of that excess that came off here. And then the yellow green, I'm gonna grab that. I'm gonna add some brown to it so it's darker. Not too much, that's too much. I'm gonna add more yellow green. More yellow green, and then use that as to add shading and detail to some of the grass and the plants that are down here. Not too much, but I want to add variability because it makes it look more three-dimensional. Maybe a little bit of outlining some of the texture on the leaves. Maybe a little bit like a shadow here and there. Some layers. Okay. I'm just rinsing off my brush. I'm gonna step back for a moment. I think we're done, but I gotta step back first to double check. Okay, yeah. I think that looks pretty good. Yeah, so that one is finished. I do like how it turned out. The colors are nice and vibrant, good contrast. As always, if you ever have questions, just shoot me a message. And that being said, I'll see you on the next one.